we okay? All right. So, one of the most important skills that you can have as a hospice nurse is, number one, understanding where somebody is, like in their own unique timeline, and then number two, displaying what I would consider a healthy respect for that timeline, but also being caring. And for those of you not familiar with hospice, the best way I can describe it is, in typical care, let's say if you have cancer, we're gonna go ahead and do everything we can to prolong your life. And once somebody gets to a point where they're tired of going to the hospital, and typical care usually takes place like in a clinic or a hospital. And by the time you get to hospice, you just wanna be comfortable. You wanna enjoy your life, you wanna stay home, and you've accepted, let's say, for example, that cancer's gonna end your life, and let's get to enjoying what I have left. And I work in admissions, so what that looks like, the first part's very easy. We understand whether or not somebody qualifies. Basically, if we don't expect them to live beyond 6 months, then they qualify. But then I spend the next like 1 to 3 hours with the family and the patient, and we decide together, like, am I ready to say hospice? Am I ready to say die? I don't know. And sometimes my colleagues will feel really frustrated with me because they feel like, for all intents and purposes, somebody is ready. Like, they want our services, they're ready to go, and yet they say no. And certainly, you know, their point is a couple weeks or days down the line, they might be in crisis, and if they're not on our services, it takes longer for us to take care of them. And I agree. But I come from a philosophy where, you know, it ain't over till it's over. And I come by that honestly through what I would consider to be the most challenging and rewarding relationship I had with a patient that happened years before I ever worked in hospice. So to keep, to honor my duty to HIPAA, we'll call this gentleman Oscar. That's not his real name. And when I first met him, the thing that really stood out to me was this contrast. I opened the door and he seemed very much asleep. And you know how some people just have an energy or an electricity? And he was like out, but I could feel his energy. And then the man in front of me was just, he looked very much like somebody who was in the last weeks, if I was being generous, but mostly days of his life. And spoiler alert, I would know this man for over a year. And so I was experienced enough at that point to be like, what is going on with this guy? And I'm standing there and looking at him, and I had the thought, I was like, what is happening here? And he answered me in his own way. All of a sudden his eyes popped open, he's like, what the fuck are you doing in here? Yes. Now, it's not scientific fact, but anybody with an ordinary family member and people in healthcare will tell you, if someone's gonna beat the odds, it's because they're mad as hell. And this man was no exception. I never thought that I would have to use my dodgeball skills, but he threw things. He threw books, he threw pens, and the occasional staff member was a lucky recipient of a urinal coming straight in. Sometimes full, sometimes empty. You never knew what you were gonna get. He had some notes for the staff. Apparently the hospital was running just fine before he was there, but all of a sudden we were all incompetent and we didn't give a shit, and we were ruining this place, burning it to the ground. And he told us that every time we ran into him. And I ended up taking care of him quite a bit, not because I was particularly skilled, but because I have terrible time management. And normal adults show up for a 7 o'clock shift at 6:45, and I show up at 6:58. And much like a game of tag, my colleagues would get there and be like, not it. And after maybe about 4 or 5 months, I really honestly started to dread work. I started to feel like a bit of a jerk. Maybe also a victim, if I'm being honest. And the one thing that he did not throw was this framed photograph of his beloved Doberman Pinscher. And the few times I did feel tenderness for this man, he would be holding this photograph and be in tears. And I want to be really clear, like, this wasn't for him, this was for me. I arranged with his wife to bring the dog to the hospital because I was like, maybe I'll like him more, or at least I get to see a dog when I'm at work. That plan would tank very quickly. He looked at me, and we were enjoying. He and I are just like sitting in a bench in the sun, and this dog's like the sweetest Doberman pinscher I've ever met. I would trust this dog with a litter of kittens. And he turns to me and he's like, she's a badass. She'd rip off anybody's face like that. We were not going to be friends. So, yeah. So, let's see, we're going to be friends. After a while, I had to be reminded, you know, nursing is a calling, and it's not always fun, and it's kicked my ass and in physical and mental ways, and sometimes you forget why you're there. And, pardon me. I had a conversation with him that made me realize I was not there to like him, I was there to love him in the best way I could if I would receive the invitation. We were talking about his code status. So code means, you know, for example, God forbid I should drop right now and not breathe and on my own, push on my chest, shock me, that's a full code. Do not resuscitate is we're not going to do anything, we're just going to hold your hand, we're going to give you medicine, we're going to be there with you, but we're going to let you pass away. And when somebody like Oscar was 90 pounds, he was in, you know, the final stages of cancer, and that procedure would not be survivable, and it's just painful and mean. And so we have that conversation with people. It's not that we don't want to care for you, we want you to be comfortable. And typically with a patient, they will say, like, oh my gosh, I had no idea, like, no, I don't want that at all, like, I don't want to be in pain. It will not be shocking to learn that Oscar was an exception to this rule. And that day he invented what I refer to as double secret probation level 7 full code. In no uncertain terms, he said that he wanted every staff member to push on his chest, he wanted all of us to break a rib, he wanted his blood and guts to spill on the floor, he wanted us to slip and fall in the guts and cry out, I'm such a failure.
Oh my God.
And directly I quote, I was like, I think I had a look on my face like, and he said, because I want you to be half as miserable as I am. Poor guy. He was one of many Vietnam veterans I've taken care of. And this is a group of folks that went away to war, came back, promised that they would be heroes. And they very much were not welcome back as heroes. And some people, you know, my feelings about war are to the side. That has to be devastating. And some people were able to recover and some people didn't. And what that looks like as a nurse caring for people at the end of their life is they wind it out in their own time. They're in a sea of pain and we just have to wait for it. So I ended up leaving that job, not because of Oscar, but I was just ready for something new. And a few months later, being a nurse is a calling, and it's not about like feeling amazing every day. I just feel almost like it's involuntary. I try to leave and I can't. And I'm not looking for rewards, but sometimes you want a reward. And I finally got a really beautiful reward. I was on my new unit, and I walked over to hospice to get supplies or something like that. And I heard a really quiet voice. And what I didn't tell you is he had a lot of colorful names for people, but he did call me Kid. And I heard, Kid, hey Kid. And it was him. And I looked in his room, and he looked just like he did the day I met him. But that electricity was gone. Thank God, at last, it was gone. And he patted next to him on the bed. And I sat next to him. And he squeezed my hand, and he said, I know I'm an asshole. And you took the time to get to know me anyway, and you saw me, and that meant the world to me. So thank you, and I love you. I could have passed out. I didn't know what to do. All I did was wait and enjoy the silence between us, squeeze his hand, and say, I love you too. Thank you.